So yeah, as was said, what I want to talk to you about in this presentation is essentially my journey from academia and then through each of the stages into my current job where I'm an animation programmer working for Cloud Imperium Games. And I kind of want to just cover each of the bits that I learnt as I went through, and what I hope to kind of give you guys is some of the lessons that I learned along the way and some of the kind of points that then helped me get the job which I'm currently in now. So from the beginning, I've always loved games. I've always been a gamer, but I don't think it ever really was a something that I wanted to take as a career until I was in college. And then I saw a making of God of War 2, which is one of my favorite series, and just seeing all the people at the end, and they look so tired and yet so happy with themselves at being able to create this thing that then I went on, like, got released and I absolutely loved and other people loved. So I think I saw that and was like, you know what, I want to be in their shoes. I want to make something that people play and love and enjoy, and create something that's visually pleasing for everyone, really. So after college, I then did my degree at the Huddersfield University. It was a computer games programming degree. It was a 4-year course with a placement year, and I was lucky enough to get into the in-house game studio that the university had. This is called Canal Side Studios, and essentially they just employed second-year students, programmers and designers, who then worked through for the year. We created a few in-house projects and little kind of like side games that we designed and implemented ourselves, but they also did a bit of contract work as well. So while I was working there, I did some work for Leeds Armories. We did like a 3D gun viewer, so you could see all the internal moving parts. And then we also did like a top trumps card game for them as well, for all the different weaponry. And also, during my degree, I developed a love for artificial intelligence, namely behavioral algorithms, flocking, using node graphs. I essentially put it in as many projects as possible. In the team project, we had enemies that flocked around the screen in the shader module. I had birds that flocked in the background that were completely not relevant. But yeah, I'd say I really chose my specialization when I was going through my degree. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to make things that moved on their own and looked cool while moving. And then I went on to do a master's in, well, it was in computer science with specialization in artificial intelligence. This was at Manchester University. And what the specialization essentially meant was I selected modules that were relevant to that specialization. These namely were optimization, planning, and problem solving. So looking at node graphs and pathfinding, genetic algorithms, machine learning. So probably heard of many of the algorithms before. So regression algorithms, SVMs, random forests, and learning about all the maths behind them and how to process data. As well as this, I also took a few other modules, such as parallel programming, which is something that I definitely wish that I'd paid attention more to, because it's something that really helps with like large scale algorithms and processes. But yeah, my master's was split into two parts. So half of it was taught, and the other half was from a dissertation. And in that dissertation, I I put facial tracking onto an iOS device. This is using random forest with constrained local model, and then the models were built in C++, and then I put it across to iOS. This process really shouldn't have taken as long as it did, and I completely fell out with iOS development from the process because it took about 3 months just to get the models running. But yeah, overall, it was quite a good look at the kind of in-depth of machine learning and developing more of this kind of specialization into AI. From this point, I then went on to go and do a PhD, also at the University of Manchester. So this kind of was where I diverted quite a bit from the games related stuff. The PhD itself was more applied clinical. I was using computer vision algorithms to detect osteoarthritis from x-rays of the knee. Now, this PhD, because it wasn't really game related, it was I was helped to choose it because I had the same supervisor as I did in my master's, and also it provided funding, which was quite a nice bonus when you've essentially not made any money for however many years. But this involved hand annotating and training computer vision algorithms on over 600 X-rays of the knee. It again used the random forest with constrained local models. And the algorithm essentially split into two. So we used our random forest with constrained local models to detect the edges of the knee. And then we had a second stage process that ran various other shape analysis and texture analysis algorithms to try and categorize the severity of each of the X-rays, as well as trying to do some other predictive analysis as well to see whether we could detect later onset osteoarthritis. Now, while this wasn't really game related, it did actually teach me quite a lot of really useful skills going on, namely patience, because hand annotating hundreds of images plays a lot with the amount of sanity that you have. And I think I fell in love with audiobooks just to kind of keep myself distracted while annotating that many images. As well as that, I kind of got a bit more in-depth look at computer vision and actually creating and using those algorithms. As well as that, being able to read papers and figure out what code and implementations people had used and then reflect that in my own work. And I think one of the best kind of outcomes from it was my supervisor, well, the CEO of the first company that I worked at, I had done a PhD in the same place, in the exact same corridor, in a similar field. And my supervisor was still in contact with him. So when I said to him that I essentially didn't want to stay in research, he recommended the job for me. But I think one of the main things that it kind of really taught me was that I didn't want to stay in research. I didn't want to keep writing papers. I wanted to create things more visually. I wanted to work with things that were a bit faster and a bit more kind of player orientated. Also, during this time, to kind of keep myself in the know and to kind of keep investing myself in games and the games industry, I started doing game jams. So in 2013, I did my first game jam. It went pretty well for the fact that I went there on my own and just met two random people and just was like, yeah, let's make a game. Cool. Since then, I've done about 5 more, and I mean, you guys must know, you must have, like, heard quite a lot about game jams, but they're a brilliant way of networking and getting involved, meeting new people. I've met, like, indie development teams who I've then gone on to do more work with later on, but they also are a really good way of focusing on your kind of end result and being able to cut the fat from all of your ideas, because the amount of ideas that I've had in game jams that just went so overscoped, and there was no chance in hell for me to actually be able to finish them in time. The kind of game jam which I highlight is always the one which I got the furthest in. I was in a pair working with a friend from my degree, and the idea was the more that you have, the worse it is. So we created a top-down 2D game where you were versus and you had to steal as many items as possible. But the idea was that the more that you had, the heavier the sack was on your back. So it meant you were really over encumbered. And then the way we got around this is that you could then projectile those items at the other player to try and then stop them from stealing other stuff. Now, this one, we actually got the game from start to finish. It had, excuse me, we even got the menus in. I was like so shocked at the amount of development that we'd done, and we had an end screen and someone could win. It was brilliant. But this was only actually achieved because we just essentially used everything we could, like Unity physics, and all the elasticity stuff for the bag. We kind of got a pre-made tile generator. We used 2D assets that were free for download. And it was only actually by combining all these things, because it's really easy to, like, essentially go, you know what, I'm going to make everything by hand and learn all this. But by using stuff that was already pre-made, it actually helped us to then further our game and be able to develop it further and tweak it so that it actually made it a bit more enjoyable to play in the end. But yeah, also Search for a Star, you guys will be very familiar. In 2016, I did the competition. I did not get through. I didn't get through to the interview stage at the end. I did the game, and essentially that was where I stopped. But it was a really good experience to essentially be able to spend a bit longer and to see how far I could actually get in 2 weeks. Also, the presentation at the end was brilliant because it kind of reaffirmed for me that, yeah, making games is really cool. And I got to see all these people who were working in essentially the industry and working in the jobs that I really would have, that I really wanted to carry on and go and work in. And then we came to my first job in my career. I started my job at Cubic Motion in 2016, so straight after the PhD. Now, Cubic Motion, what they do is they are a facial animation, they create facial animation for video games and film. I worked for them as a machine learning researcher, and the kind of machine learning part of the company, what they do is they have a two-stage process. The first of which tracks points from 2D or 3D film, and then the second stage, which I was working primarily in, got those points and then predicted expressions from them. This was done by breaking down expressions into a facial action coding system. This is best seen by these sliders on this face on the right. Essentially, what it means is like each of the different areas of the face are controlled by sliders. And essentially, by combining sliders, the slider values, you then hope to create a realistic looking expression. And what else the company does is they've done many live events and still are. But one thing that I really enjoyed when I was working for them is that I was involved in two of the live events. One of which was the one at GDC, the Meet Mike. I don't know whether any of you have seen this one, but essentially we had a live performance in front of a live audience at GDC. And we had Mike Seymour up on the stage with a stereo camera, and then we were predicting the expressions in front of everyone onto this very nicely done 3D model. But yeah, the whole experience was, I'd say it was quite stressful. It was quite an intense 2 weeks, but it really helped kind of seeing the behind the scenes and being at a GDC and seeing all the other people kind of working on their really cool tech and stuff that was game related was really fun. From this point, I then started my job at VTime. So when working at Cubic Motion, it was really cool working alongside it and seeing like the 3D models coming back from games. But it wasn't really, I still wasn't programming visual enough. I still wasn't kind of there yet, I felt. So I then took a job as an animation programmer working for VTime in 2018. So these are a social media virtual reality kind of application, and they work across VR and AR, and they kind of handle various stuff with like mobile phones and VR devices. So as an animation programmer, I developed a inverse kinematic system to work with the VR inputs, so the handset and the headset. This was using a forward and backward reach IK with rotational constraints. Essentially, it's just solving kind of the realistic places for like your arm to be in, and then you have the rotational constraints to stop it or to try and stop the arm from doing anything crazy like rotating through the body. As well as this, I also worked with the iOS getting their facial action coding system essentially from the iOS into avatars. And I also did a bit with lip sync, where using recorded voice to then try and move the mouth in time and make it look like the avatars were speaking. But I don't think this went ahead into the actual release product. But yeah, then we kind of come to my next life event, which was having a child. So that was an experience and a half. Here she is commenting on YouTube videos at about par with the average level of YouTube comments. But yeah, in 2019, I had my daughter, and the one thing that you kind of realize with having kids is how much free time you actually used to have. And I think for me personally, it really helped with this very limited amount of free time around it to focus me and to kind of make me think a lot about where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do and whether actually games was still something that I wanted to go forward with. And it was kind of like around maternity time that it was really kind of like solidified in my head. Like, I don't care how it happens. I want to work in games, and I want to see if it's right. You've got to try these things out. And then we come to my latest job, which is working for Cloud Imperium Games. So I started in March, 2 weeks before lockdown, and essentially just started to learn people's faces and then everyone at home. But no, to be honest, overall, the process was really seamless. With having the company in the US, Frankfurt, and in multiple locations in the UK, they were fairly used to the fact that everything would just have to be run from teams and people would all have to be working remotely. So I think overall, like the transition across was really good. It was just, I think, a bit of a shock from me going from, oh, I really want to start learning and meeting new people and socially interacting again, to nope, back home. But yeah, if you've not heard, Cloud Imperium, they're working on a multiplayer trading and combat simulation space game called Star Citizen, as well as the single player counterpoint of that, of Squadron 42. So as an animation programmer, I work as part of the actor feature team. This team looks at the different functionality of the actor, which goes across AI and the player, and handles different behaviors and interactions with the environment, as well as some external effects on the actual actor as well. Now, working at the company, it's been quite eye-opening for me because of the kind of level of work that you've done, and as well with the way that the work has been split up. So we're each given a feature to complete, usually for a deadline date of release because it's a crowd-funded game. So in the projects which I've been working on, I've been essentially myself and an animator working towards creating the feature. So when I first got started on improving the actual throw system. And as a programmer, it's then up to you to roadmap out the implementation. So figuring out all the states and stages and how it's going to flow in between the different parts. So for the throw, if you take like the vanilla case, you equip your grenade, you prime your grenade, you prepare it to throw, and then you actually throw the grenade. And then it's adding all the different animations and getting all of the visual side of it to look like it all flows and it all works. As well as this, it's handling all the other stuff. Say you've just picked something up off the floor and you then want to throw it, or you just want to put it down next to you. So then you skip out the equip and the priming because it was just a rock. And then you prepare it to throw and then you throw. And as well as this, with it being such a large game and you're handling so many different things, you've got to handle so many different problem cases. I think my favorite bug that came back was if you prime the grenade and then you sit in a chair, he would then put it back on his belt and then it'd explode, killing him. So yeah, there's been quite a lot of back and forth and figuring out all the different nuances to try and make it as seamless as possible. And a lot of this goes towards the fact that, so we have a very large Q&A team. We have each of the feature teams have their own Q&A person that are like brilliant and send back loads of bugs. But a lot of that kind of falls on as you as a programmer in trying to make the feature as playable as possible so that you can then get enough feedback back to then actually start making improvements that then help you get more feedback along the way, especially with it being a crowd-funded game and was having regular releases of features. When this feature's completed, you've essentially got to make sure that it runs as seamlessly as you possibly can. And as well as this, with each of the teams that kind of splits, you also do a lot of collaboration and teamwork with other specialized teams. So for the throw alone, I think I had contact with the props team, so getting the different parts of the grenade working properly, the visual effects, so we had a light on the grenade, the audio, getting that timed with the lighting, and then there's like getting it working with the networks. You got physics on the end, you've got UI for drawing the trajectory from the grenade, and all of this in its kind of culmination. I think one thing that I realized with doing the throw is this thing that seemed like it would just be fairly simple. Oh, you just get a grenade and you throw it, can take months, not just weeks. All these kind of processes and getting it robust enough to actually be released takes a long time. So yeah, essentially that's been my journey. And I think as a last few points, there's quite a few on this page, is to I want to go over what's been most valuable for me going through. So my path hasn't been really the straightest cut. It's definitely been a roundabout route in ending up in the industry. But I've learned quite a lot, both academically, personally, and also professionally as well along the way. My PhD definitely wasn't essential, but I think one of the main things that I'm really happy for the fact that it taught me is how to be able to pace yourself with a project and with work that's not going to just be over really quickly. I say definitely for me, like I get easily hooked up in the fact of you starting new things and you get in the high of like, oh, I get to start this new programming thing. Oh, I'm going to start this new project and getting interested in new algorithms and experimenting with new things. But when you're doing a project essentially for 3 years, and in that is involved in all the research and write up and reading all the stuff around and kind of fully immersing yourself in that field. It was a really good kind of realization and learning experience, then being able to enjoy the slower pace of development and enjoy still like the kind of smaller wins with kind of like slow attrition towards your goal. As well as the PhD and my specialization in my degree, I specialized very early in what I wanted to do. I think I'm quite lucky in the fact that my degree had a lot of specializations that I could do and I could like experience. But also saying this, so like I specialized quite early, and doing those specialized jobs then helped me get into a higher position in the games industry. However, if I had turned around and gone, actually, I hate AI and I hate artificial intelligence, hate animation programming, then being able to go to a more generalized role or to a different specialization probably would have been a bit harder, and I definitely would have had to have started off at a lower position. But yeah, as well, one thing that used to make me really anxious about kind of taking all these different roles and doing all this different experience was I used to get really worried at the fact that they weren't directly game related. And I worried that, like, I'd take all these different paths and that I would never be able to then go back into the games industry because I'd diverged myself too much. But really, like, as I hope you can see across my journey, is making the slower steps. Like, I don't think I could have got in the games industry straight after my PhD. But then taking the route which I did, it like slowly gets you into a position that then kind of like lines up, and then the hop across became easier. Like I was getting myself more and more and more game related, and then making that transition was much easier, and there was a lot more opportunity for me from that position. And as well saying that, so one thing I will say, because I used to get, well, I still do, like it's never easy leaving a job. You're never going to please everyone. And that used to always make me feel really, really vulnerable because it was like you were letting people down, and I absolutely hate letting people down. But you can't be afraid to move jobs, and you can't be afraid to keep chasing after what your dream is, because at the end of the day, you're the only one who controls that. And if you're not happy and you still want to, like for me, it was like, I still want to work in games. I've tried all these other things, but no, it's still there. This want to kind of experience it. And even just, maybe it didn't turn out. Maybe I'd hate it or something. But that idea of the fact that I just wanted to work in games before I made that decision to not kept me going and kept me transitioning towards jobs that were more related and more related and more related. As well, like not limiting your choices. So I definitely didn't end up in the complete specialization that I thought that I would. But looking back at the stuff that I enjoyed about artificial intelligence, it was the behaviors of things, it was making things visual, it was making things look realistic and seamless, which actually is kind of animation programming in its entirety. But yeah, so it's not limiting your choices or not making yourself as fixed on your goal. Because I think for me, it was always I want to work in AI, and then the subset was in Sony and on the next God of War game. Oh, that'd be so cool. But it's kind of like making your goal a bit more flexible. And I think I realized very fast that you've got to kind of make these kind of choices towards the kind of key point of what you want your goal to be. It's I want to do programming in games. That's what I'm seeking. As well, putting yourself forward for competitions and events. Like, this has been really helpful over my time, even if it's just, like a participation. Like, I don't think I've won anything in any of the events or competitions I've put myself forward to, but sometimes it's just the networking and the talking to people and talking about various different ideas and making yourself feel like, every time I would go to like EGX or I talk to kind of indie developers, it always makes me feel really impassioned. Like, yes, this is what I want to do. These are the people I want to work with. This is like still something that I want to seek and be involved in as a industry and as a community. As well as another point, like, is you don't want to be it's all very good and well kind of being able to create these games on your own and being this one-man army. Like, absolute kudos to you. I've realized over my development is that isn't what I want to do. I like being a cog in the machine because it helps me then be able to specialize and focus on the areas of game development that I really enjoy. You leave the other specializations and passions up to other people, and then with that, you then can share your ideas and become a more robust and more developed programmer. And as a final 2 points, I first want to say, so like, this presentation essentially has just been a long list of my actual successes. Behind each of these stages, there's been countless applications that haven't been gone through or been answered. There's interviews that have been absolutely messed up, or thought went really well but then still never got the job. Opportunities that I couldn't take because of life events or other external influences. So at the end, it's a really grueling process. I think I can safely say that pretty much most people that have got into the industry or got into anything that's been a career choice that has been a passion of theirs is it's very difficult. And the thing that really helped me get through and to just carry on was having that pinnacle point of that I knew that I would be disappointed if I didn't at least try. And it's that whole saying, it's like, you throw enough mud and eventually it's going to stick. And for me, the enough mud was not taking the direct path, but going, oh, this bit's cool, and oh, this bit's kind of relevant, and oh, this bit's there, and oh, there we go. And as well as this, so I'm in the games industry now, but even still, like, I'm still trying to keep myself involved in the community. I'm still going to conference events. I'm still reading up different backgrounds with different games. I'm not doing game jams. I don't think I could actually hide myself away from my family without distraction or guilt. So as soon as we kind of are allowed to go back out again and socialize with people, game jams are definitely going to be back on that list of things that I do. But it's good to keep yourself involved and passionate about the kind of place and industry that you're in, especially for all the different things that you can learn talking to different people. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening. I hope that's been a help in some ways. And does anyone have any questions? And I'll just close this off.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jessie. That was great. Really good, really good kind of rundown of, your journey in, which is it's always good and interesting to hear people's personal journeys, and I'm sure there's a lot of people here who will be able to relate to various different parts. We've had a lot of questions in, so we'll try and run through as many as we can in the next 10 minutes or so. First one, I'll keep it fairly general. So Rowan has asked, as a programmer, how did you present your code in your portfolio to show off your skills? I've heard it's difficult for programmers to show off code as it's not visual. It's not as visual as traditional and 3D art. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, I have a website. I mean, I've kind of like taken it down to do some revamp at the moment, but I have a website of essentially all the different projects that I've done, and I kind of put on that all the stuff that I kind of wanted to show off. So various different game jams, some of the university work I've done, as well as some little side projects. So I really like doing I did a couple of IK things. I did a couple of marching squares algorithms, because I thought that was really interesting. So say the best way that I found to actually show off that work was to make little YouTube videos. So like little YouTube videos of like the game jam or search for a star or like the marching squares, and also put things up on GitHub so that they can see what your code looks like. Also make it as clean as possible, because I realized how messy my code was and had to absolutely fine tune everything out. But yeah, essentially just have that as a backup, because sometimes as well, like with Cloud Imperium, they never said that they would look at a portfolio. I went for the interview and they were like, okay, cool. So let's see your work then. Have you got a portfolio? And I was like, yep. Luckily, I still have a website.
I think it's always probably a very strong bet to just always assume they're going to want to see some work, regardless of what kind of job you're going for in the games industry. Probably expect they're going to want to see some examples.
And always be prepared for the surprise interview questions, because they do like throwing technical questions at you.
Certainly. Excellent. So Fabi has asked, what's it like to work as a woman in a field like this? Are there any, I'm guessing, additional challenges that you've had to deal with?
So, I wish I kind of knew more about this. I think I've been quite lucky in the fact that most of the companies that I've worked in and a lot of the positions that I've been in, it's been quite diverse. I don't think I've had anything that's singled me out as a woman for being like, you can't do this, or you're not able to work in this field. I think through my earlier jobs in my career, because I was a machine learning researcher, I was kind of a bit more of an independent worker. So often it was kind of like, you did this project independently, so I didn't really have people above me kind of being able to either control or to take work off me, because I was quite, you do this, you're in your corner, you make things better. But and then also at Cloud Imperium, like, it's absolutely not. It's a really diverse and really friendly team. So yeah, I think I've been quite lucky. I've not really had anything that I've gone, that's really sexist.
Yeah, I think generally the games industry is usually there'll be isolated cases which are well documented, obviously, but yeah, I think generally the games industry's got to be one of the most liberal, industries compared to a lot of other industries.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Berat has asked, how important and valuable do you think joining events like game jams are as an undergraduate for future career opportunities, and what other events can you suggest?
I think it's really valuable. Like, even like I said in the last slide, like, even if it's just you just turning up, participation award, it's really good both for mentally and for like socially. So some of the stuff, like I did a game jam for it was the Manchester game jam. Anyway, but they've stopped running it now. But some of the people that I actually met there, I then met over like drinks later on, and then they were already in an indie dev company, so they needed a programmer to come and help out. So it was through that, and through having that network, I then got some external work, that then went up, and my name's on it. So it's good to kind of show off, and also to meet new people, so that you can get more experience in games. And I think also, like, it's really good when you're going for jobs, because it shows that you have that passion, and that in any way, shape or form you just enjoy making games. But yeah, for other events, so I've been to EGX, I've done various game jams, usually around Manchester. What else is there? Stuff like this, come to this conference. I've gone up to ones where like my university had a few talks from people in the games industry there, so I'd always go to the talks and then try and talk to them at the end, even if it was just about how cool their game was.
I think the key thing is that literally anything can be, when you're at a graduate or a student level, doing anything is going to help. Even if you just pick up one contact, from somewhere, start up one conversation, they can all benefit you in the long term when you're looking for jobs.
So I've just seen that question there, what the lizard's called. She's called Radagast.
Where does that name come from?
Oh, it's Lord of the Rings.
Of course.
Radagast the Brown.
we've got time for a couple more. So this is a pretty broad one, but in your opinion, I guess. So Grace has asked, what are the core fundamentals of preparing to work in the games industry? What exactly does an employer want to see? Pretty big question.
I know it is quite a big question. They want to see that you're passionate. They want to see that you're invested, that you're good to work with, that you can collaborate. I think for Cloud Imperium, because it's such a big game, it was, they wanted to see and know about examples of where I'd worked with large systems and how I'd been able to incorporate my work with other large systems. So some of the stuff in my PhD was like kind of working with other people or like, collaboration with other indie developers. And obviously, like a lot of this you'll learn because sometimes it's really hard to work in a big company before you then work in a big company. So a lot of that has been taught on the job. But I think they just wanted to, overall, they just kind of want to make sure that you're going to be prepared for the level of work that's going to be involved.
Certainly. So Daniel's asked, how did you find the technical transition from education to industry? Did your games programming background and AI expertise translate and prepare you in a way you expected, or did it feel like the deep end with a lot of retraining and going in new directions from there?
No, I don't think that it felt like a lot of retraining. Like a lot of the stuff was really, really relatable. So from going from like the games programming, like we did a lot of pathfinding, we did behavioral algorithms, we did no graphs, and especially for like my specialization, those stuff really, really helped. Being able to work in teams using the team programming kind of modules that we had. We did some stuff on C++, but I'd say a lot of it was probably language barriers. So a lot of the time, especially because I moved around in different expertise, I often found it quite difficult to get infused in the different kind of jargon that they used. So that was probably like a big one for me, is that you've essentially got to spend the first few months figuring out what they're talking about and how that relates to all these things. And then once you make those kind of connections, like a lot of it was already there beforehand. Of stuff to kind of look at, it's difficult to say. Just kind of keep yourself, if there's stuff that you find interesting, if there's algorithms that you find interesting, have a look as well at there's quite a few papers I've seen and read along the way that were from people who are doing games development and writing papers about them, and kind of just seeing like those different things and seeing what the kind of research elements were and then how they translated over into games.
Yeah. Last one now. So Renato's asked, how familiar do you have to be with game design principles as a programmer?
Yeah, it's difficult to say because it's like, no, you've got to be fairly understanding of them. You've got to understand kind of what the processes are like. So like in Cloud Imperium, we have like 2-week sprints. You've got to be able to map the amount of how long all of your tasks are going to take, and understand kind of what all your relationships are going to lie with other parts of the game development process. You're often, so we've got designers who kind of originally design the idea, and then you're working with animators and figuring out all the different problems behind it. I'd say you've got to be pretty understanding, or at least have some good knowledge about what's involved in the whole process. Even if you're just working on, like I am, like little core features, it's the wider impact and the wider investment, and also how to make things enjoyable for people to play them as well.
Yeah, I think the key thing to emphasise, I suppose, is it's a team effort, isn't it? To make a game, you're not totally isolated in doing your little bit.
No,
so an appreciation of what everyone else does sounds like it's pretty important.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, look, that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much, Jessie, for today. Everyone in the chat is going to be saying thank you now, I'm sure. That was really good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming.